All right. Hey, folks. So today I'm going to be doing a critique of Alphadestinys Naturally Enhanced program. Thanks for joining me. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So firstly, a bit of background about what I know of Alex. Now, I was sort of loosely aware of Alex when he first came out in about 2012-ish. And I think he came out around about the same time as Jeff Nippard started doing stuff on YouTube. I was sort of aware of him as the kind of second wave of YouTube fitness guys after the original OGs like Omar Isuf. Now, at the time, I didn't pay much attention to him as I don't listen to many YouTube guys. But recently, over the last 3 or 4 weeks, my friend Steve Shaw from Massive Iron mentioned him. And so I started looking into him more and I was very impressed. I quite liked his stuff. So it was scarily similar how close he is to his training philosophy that I am to mine. The type of stuff he's doing now is scarily similar to the type of stuff that I was doing when I was at my strongest. So immediately I'm like, I like this guy. So yeah, I'm like, yeah, I like this guy. He's cool. So I've been listening to his stuff and I thought I would do a critique of Naturally Enhanced. Now, I don't want to give away the program because I think that would be unfair to him. So if you have an interest in it, go over to his site and buy his ebook. But what I wanted to do is talk more in a top-down view about his overriding principles of his routine and compare and contrast them to mine and where I've sort of done things differently and why I have, and try and give an unbiased point of view on our routines. So hopefully you guys will find this useful. So let's crack on with what we've got now. These are the strands that I want to focus on. So full body twice a week with additional GPP. Intensity and volume days, moderate to high volume, density of work, 3-week waves, body part, de-emphasis, and concurrent periodization. Those are the areas, the sort of strands that I want to mostly discuss. So if we firstly look at, he promotes full body routines, which I do as well. Now, I think that's kind of cool. That was firstly immediately what drew my attention to him. So both of the programs that I've put out so far have been full body routines, whether it's the Tactician, which is what I used to build my strongest lifts way back in like 2012-ish, or the Wizard, which I used around about the same time or previously for more of a bodybuilding emphasis. So I'm a big fan of full body. Now, when it comes to where we differ, Alex generally tends to prefer 2 sessions of full body per week, and his 3rd or 4th or however many other sessions are GPP, which is directly from the whole West Side Barbell, playbook. I do things a little bit differently. Now, if we look at why we would do GPP in the first place, GPP is there for a few different reasons. Firstly, it's there for additional work on weak areas, right, or areas that you want to emphasize, like Alex does his neck a lot, which is cool. Or other things like maybe, I don't know, triceps or something where he's trying to promote additional muscle mass. Second reason is it promotes recovery. So you get a lot of high repetitions in that area, and that area gets engorged with blood, which is good for ligament health. And third reason is just generally getting you fitter. Now, I do know Alex runs, or at least he used to. I looked at some of his stuff about running, which is quite cool. So he does that also for recovery. So there's 3 main reasons there. Now, I personally tend to prefer a light day. Now, the reason I prefer a light day is it's almost like a whole body GPP session, all right? Because it does encourage blood flow. It does encourage general heart health and health in general. And it does encourage hypertrophy on the entire body. So I find my light session works as a blood flow session. It works as a GPP, but for the entire body, and it's very targeted. So on a light day, I will do high repetitions with short rest periods, but for every body part. And I find that is a little bit more useful personally. That's what I see. So I don't call it GPP work, but I do refer to my light day occasionally as a recovery day because it's designed to recover you from your heavy sessions. So in a sense, while it might look very different, I have 3 full body days. He has 2 plus GPP. It's actually very similar because the light day accomplishes the same thing. So yeah, I think there's a lot of similarities in our approaches there. In terms of what we're trying to accomplish, we just go about it differently. So moving on. Next thing is intensity and volume days. So I think this is another area which is quite useful. I personally think that singles are very useful for pushing top end strength, And as a result, that builds your repetition strength as well, just gets you used to handling more weight. I think particularly if you make the case, if you're a powerlifter or a strength athlete, you probably should be in touch with singles year round. And I also believe that's the case. I don't necessarily think you have to be in touch with max singles year round, and that's probably where we differ. So whereas Alex would do maximum singles on a variation, I tend to prefer like a Bulgarian single, like a daily max on a variation, which is closely related to the powerlift. So we're very similar in that respect. We just vary things probably less frequently. I vary things less frequently. He varies things more frequently. But we both agree intensity work tends to be a good idea. I think, like he does, the majority of your work should still be in that like 5 to 15 rep range. Some of it should be single rep and lower repetitions. Some of it should be super high rep, but the bulk of it is in that repetition range. So again, very similar, just different ways of setting things out. I tend to have intensity and volume on both days, and then sort of a lighter day in between, but he does things differently. Next is moderate to high volume. Neither of us are minimalistic, and I like that about him. I think he's actually made a video in the past himself called minimalism, something about minimalism sucks or something like that. Volume drives strength. This is something that maddens me when I hear this. People think powerlifting routines or strength routines have to be minimalistic, low repetition routines. It's completely untrue. Every really big and strong guy that I know is also jacked. Like, they're not just strong, they're big as well. And yes, you're always going to get one skinny guy who, lifts a lot of weight, sure, right? But you slap 20 pounds of muscle on that guy and he's going to lift more weight. So yeah, I think they both go hand in hand. And there's this misconception that strength work is just low repetition work. It's just not true. You need everything. You need everything. So strength building should be mostly repetition work. And if you look at my tactician program, which is my powerlifting program, my power building program, it's mostly rep work. There are a few singles littered in, but it's mostly rep work. So volume very much drives strength, and him and I agree on that quite a lot. So it's another area where we agree. Again, things are probably placed slightly differently, but the overall agreement is there. Now, one thing which I'm very interested in is density of work. And I really like this about Alex. He talks about how you should be able to fit in quite a lot of work in an hour or hour and a half of training, because you're timing rest periods. You're not taking as long as people traditionally take, or as long as what maybe perhaps the science says is optimal. What you're trying to do is you're trying to get your workout to be nice and dense with work. Density of work refers to doing more work or equal work in shorter space of time. So I think timing rest periods is a very, very productive thing to do, to fit in all the work which you're required to fit in on a limited number of days per week. I think modern research sort of discounts the body's ability to adapt to shorter rest periods and the value of greater density. I think it's a little bit maddening again when people say I like to take my time on rest periods, rest as long as I can, because I get more repetition. It's like, well, yeah, but if you're resting 3 minutes between sets and somebody next to you is resting a minute to a minute and a half, they're going to be getting more work in that same hour. So it's a bit short-sighted. And as I say, I think there's something to be said for doing shorter rest periods on certain parts of your routine. Like, I'm not suggesting do that for your singles, but certainly for some of the high repetition work, you can condense the rest periods down quite a lot. And I think there's value in doing that. So next one is 3 waves. Now, I think the purpose of this is to ensure that you're recovering well, you're periodizing your training. So 3 waves are very powerful because you can build up to a peak and then switch to something else, build up to a peak, and continuously build that strength. And the way that Alex does it is he'll build that strength across 3 weeks, then switch to a different group of exercises and go again. Now, I think there's a lot of value in that. The way that I've traditionally done this is with deloads. So there are pros and cons of either approach. So I have done both. I've done deloads. I've also done 3 waves. I've done either. In my tactician book, I generally favor deloads, but then the exercises are varied in a different way there. The variation there is more tied to the rep scheme. So there are pros and cons. I think the pros of the 3 wave is that there's constant variation. Now, that constant variation means you're more likely to stay pain-free, and you're more likely to build a wider range of strengths. That's 2 very important things. For long-term continued progress, you've got to stay injury-free. And it's probably wise to have a good all-round level of strength. I find for deloads, they work very well with people who have got a lot to gain. So if you're still only benching 60, 80, 90 kilos, deloads tend to work quite well because you've got a lot of progress to be made. So, and the benefit is you're almost immediately going to go straight back to the same set of exercises that you were doing prior to your deload. So you get this almost immediate feedback about whether you're improving or not. Whereas with a 3-week wave and exercise rotation, you almost have to come back around to that exercise in maybe another 6 weeks or 9 weeks or whatever it is. With deloads and getting straight back on the same routine, you get almost instant feedback, and that's quite valuable, particularly if you've got a lot to gain. It's not the kind of thing I would do if you were super advanced. Then I think it's probably wiser to include more variation, the way that Alex does things, and use the 3-week waves. But certainly for someone who's got a lot to gain, I think there's a lot to be said for just having a simple deload, alleviating some fatigue, and then getting right back into the mix of things and trying to improve. Right, next is body part de-emphasis. So he de-emphasizes the quads, certainly. And yeah, he just has a look that he goes for, the big traps and all that stuff. I think that's fine. I have no issue with that whatsoever. I've personally always been biased more towards whole body emphasis because I've either been powerlifting or doing strongman or doing bodybuilding. So as a result, you kind of need a whole body emphasis there. But so my approach is probably a bit more like mainstream. His is a bit more biased to what he likes and he thinks looks good. And I think that's fine. I have absolutely no issue with that whatsoever. It's a good look. It suits him. Finally, concurrent periodization. Again, not a massive amount to say on this from me. I think it's very sensible. I think we accomplish a lot of the same. We accomplish a lot of the same things. We think about the difficulties of training in many of the same ways. That we think about how do we accomplish accommodation? How do we get around the law of accommodation? How do we include single repetition work? How do we include a lot of high repetition work? We think about all the same things, but we just accomplish them in slightly different ways. And that's one of the things I like about Alex is we're trying to accomplish the same things. We are aware of the problems of training. We're not just saying everything is 3 sets of 10 and that will take care of it, or everything is like a top set, back off set approach, and that will just take care of it. We are aware that there are certain issues in training when you're trying to get advanced, and we're trying to take care of them in our own ways. So I like that about Alex, and I think that's one of the reasons why our training is far more similar than it is different. So yeah, overall, I've put this down as how I would improve Alphadestinys Naturally Enhanced, just because that's the title of the series that I'm doing. I've done lots of the other ones of these, other types of these videos, but in reality, there's not much I would do to improve. I think it's actually a very sensible style of training. I think he's a very knowledgeable trainer, and I think when you've got a couple of guys who are very strong, who know what it takes to get very strong, their philosophies are probably going to be similar more than they're going to differ. I think when you've got somebody who's saying something completely different, that's usually when a warning sign goes off in my head going, yeah, I'm not sure how much I can trust about what he says. But with Alex, I think he's very trustworthy. I do think he's natural. I think he's very intelligent. And I think his workout routines would produce a lot of results for you guys. So I'm a big fan. Right, folks, I'm going to call it there, and I'll speak to you all soon.